This video will try to show how to create multi-brain recipes. The scenario that I have is that I have two different rooms, an office and an attic. Within the office, I have a Samsung TV connected to a matrix, an HD-based T matrix on output 4. Off the matrix, I also have an Apple TV and a Blu-ray connected on there, input 1 and input 3. Also within the attic, I have an openHAB instance running the NEEO binding and transport. It's got a wake on LAN binding because that binding will wake up the Blu-ray. And I have two brains, one in the office and one in the attic. The office one, we're just going to name A505 or A50, and the one in the attic, 8D1. Now, the goal of this experiment is to let this brain control both devices, even though they're in different rooms. Now, the only way to do that is for this brain to control this brain's devices. So we use the openHAB instance to create a mesh between these two to expose anything attached to the openHAB instance to this brain. So that's going to include the AD1 brain devices and the Wake on LAN devices. Now, if we go to our paper UI, which is the openHAB, one of the openHAB interfaces, you'll see that I've already discovered the AD1 brain here. I didn't discover the other brains, but I could have. But when we discovered the brain, it discovered the attic room, and also it discovered the devices within the attic room. And right now, I just discovered this device. So within the attic room, you can see that we have recipes to turn on and off the HDMI switch. And within the HDMI switch, you can see we have all the outputs that we could activate. Likewise, I could hit Show Properties. I could see that on NEEO, it's an HDMI switch, and it's got 1 second delays. So how to connect them all? We use the transport then to expose one item to the next item, which is coming up there. So we go to the NEEO. All right, this is the NEEO transport configuration screen. You'll see we found all our different brains. We're going into things. You'll see all the various things out here. Now, the virtual thing is a wake on a LAN thing. It's virtual because it's a openHAB 1 item. But within this, you'll see I've got a rule called WL Blu-ray that will actually wake the Blu-ray up. You'll see I've got all the various brain items from the prior screen showed here. You'll see it automatically picked up the correct type and the timings. If we look at the attic, which is where all the recipes are, you'll see we have the recipes. Now, one nice thing about the transport is that I can modify the devices going from one brain to the other brain. So in this case, I don't want to expose the active scenarios with the current setup. Likewise, scenario I don't care about. I'm going to make these buttons the recipe turn on and turn off buttons. And since I don't like those labels, I'm going to say HDMI on and HDMI off. And I'm going to save that. Now, when this is exposed to the A50 brain, it'll only see these two recipes with those labels. Let's go to the switch. So we got the switch here. I really hate output label type stuff. So since I can modify things, I'm going to say output office. And I could say input Apple TV and input Blu-ray. One other real nice thing about the transport, being able to modify the device going from one brain to the other, is that I could also add things. The matrix switch, to switch anything, you need to, it's a two-action thing. You need to say, okay, I'm going to do HDMI, I need to press HDMI 3, now goes to output 4. So it's a two-step process. Not very friendly from a user interface, so what I'd like to do is combine these into a single action. So I can add a trigger item, an openHAB trigger item, and I'll call this one Apple TV. On the in NEEO, I'll say switch to Apple TV, and that's going to be a button. Likewise, I'll do the same. Oh, I said applet. I'll say Blu-ray. Oh man, double. Switch to Blu-ray. These will then trigger then when I press these in on the remote, it will trigger this item name, and I can set up a rule then to capture this item name and do the double action for me. So let's save that, and let's go take a look at that rule. So these are the rules. You'll see it's Apple TV and Blu-ray, which is what I'm calling them. The Apple TV, this is a long name. I could have renamed this to be much smaller, same with these macro names. But for the demo, I just went with this. So this is saying when that Apple TV event is triggered, we're going to send on to the input 1, even though that's hard to see, and we're going to send output 5 or 4, the Office one. So basically, we're combining those two. Now the Blu-ray, I'm also adding in the wake on LAN because the Blu-ray likes falling asleep. So it's going to wake up the Blu-ray, then it's going to do input 3 and then output 4 to switch the Office to the Blu-ray. Now, how does that look? So on the left side, this is the brain in the attic. On the right side, we have the brain in the office. Now we have the TV device already there, which is a Samsung TV. Now I'm going to add a new device. I could search openHAB, I could search for the matrix, I could do all sorts of searches, but the easiest thing is just to do the brain ID, which I only do AD1 since that's pretty unique. And you'll see that it's found those brain devices. So I'm going to add the room itself. I'm going to put it in the attic. Next. And I'm going to add the switch right there. And I'm also going to put that in the attic. And I'm done. Now I'm going to want to modify the TV recipe to also start up the switch and to include the new shortcut. So let's go into the recipe for the TV. We'll do launched. I'm going to, oops, that was the wrong thing to hit. So let's wait for this. I do that too often. So I'm going to hit add step. I'm going to send command to a device. The accessory is our room recipe. So I'm going to say I want the HDMI on. And then I'm going to add a step. I'm going to send to the device. And by default, I'm going to send the switch to Apple TV. So by default, when I'm turning it on, it's going to look at the Apple TV since that's where all our stuff is. Now, while the TV is coming on, which takes a while, I'm going to go ahead and also turn on the accessory and switch over to that. And I'm not going to test that right now, so I'm going to hit done. And let's go ahead and go into this recipe because I want to add the shortcuts. And I'm going to add that switch to, I'm going to add those two switch twos. Switch to and switch to Blu-ray. Done. Done. Okay, let's get out of this and turn this off. Now I didn't modify the power off TV recipe to power off the HDMI switch, but that would be pretty easy. So now when we hit the TV to power it on, you see it's starting the TV. Now it's turned on the HDMI switch over on the other brain. You can't tell from this portion of the video that it's also switched the Apple TV. And likewise, I have the two switch to Apple TV HDMI switch and switch to Blu-ray ready to go. In the next part of this video, I'm going to try to switch over to the remote itself and show you how it works on the screen. Okay, here we are in the attic with the Samsung TV. You can see the NEEO remote down there, or the remote right there, and the brain right there. So I'm going to try to do this with two hands. So I'm starting the TV up, which you'll see it starts up, turns on the HDMI matrix, and puts us to the Apple TV, which that's just the banner of the Apple TV. While I wait for the banner to go away, since the last video I also added, you'll see the input Apple TV, input Blu-ray, output Office, and power on and off for the switch, because I realized if I just did these top switches, that's just demonstrating the rules. I wanted to demonstrate executing the other brain's macros on this brain. So let's first do the rule switch to Blu-ray. I can press that, and you'll see it switches over to the Blu-ray. I could press the Apple TV to switch back to the Apple TV. So that shows that that brain is communicating with the rules. I could also say input Blu-ray, output Office. Again, input or output Office. I must have hit it. It's kind of hard to do this. I could also power off. Oops, is that off or on? That's on. I power off. As you see, the switch powers off, power it back on, and it takes a few seconds for it to power back on. And there you go. So those two top ones were the rule that I set up to combine actions on the other brain, and these actually communicate to the other brain without any interaction beyond openHAB just being the middleband to create the mesh. So that shows you that that brain can control other brains.